But I strongly believe, like, look, if you're a startup early on, especially, you have to take bets that other people won't. You have to find candidates that other people aren't necessarily already pricing as super spectacular and stuff. Or you just have to be super, super compelling. I mean, we've had founders where like the offer looks not as like compelling, but they're just really compelling, and the product is really
They
compelling.
believe. They get them to believe on going that journey with them.
Welcome to the podcast, where we introduce you to incredible humans who share their journeys with the mission to inspire you to harness your own inner tenacity to drive your life and career forward. And now, your host, Adam Posner.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the podcast, where I bring you the best and the brightest from the world of business, marketing, and personal growth to help you harness your inner tenacity and drive your career forward. Folks, my guest today on the podcast is Amit Matani, CEO of Wellfound, formerly AngelList Talent, and he has spent the last decade working on what fuels him, helping startups and job seekers connect. And before taking leadership positions, he spent his career in startups, working with building and founding companies whose apps have been used by millions of people. And each experience has helped him understand the intricacies of building a driven, motivated, and successful team from the ground up, leading us to his most recent project. And today he's taking his decades of learning to Recruiter Cloud, an AI-backed product focused on helping remove the friction of recruiting, fostering more seamless connections, and enable great teams with future-defining ideas. It's a mouthful. We have a lot to unpack, so let's get to it. Amit, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, Adam. Great to be here.
Oh, awesome, man. Thank you so much for joining me. I'm going to shut that music off, and we're going to get the show on the road here. And we were just laughing. We're both fathers. He's a little bit earlier in his journey, and now I feel like the old dad in the room, right? Like I feel like I'm like, geez, I gotta just, I'm getting old, but we've bonded over our understanding of simple black t-shirts.
They're easy. They hide the stains. That's what we need them for.
It's not like a Steve Jobs thing. You're like, you know what? I'm just going to stick with, I'm just going to stick with all black shirts. That way I don't have to think about it. And there's one less decision to make in the morning.
I think it probably started with something like that. And then, it was like, this is just easier. I like the way it looks. It's simple, it's easy.
I get it, though. Like, it took me a while to understand the whole Steve Jobs thing, right? But then it's like, you know what? You don't have to decide. That's like your uniform. And if you like the way it looks and it's easy, you kind of just go with it. But, first and foremost, I want to thank you and the team for being tremendous partners and sponsors of the podcast. Deeply appreciate that and believing in me. And that goes a long way. So thank you. Really do appreciate that. I believe life is all about partnerships and trying things out and testing and see what works and exposing everyone to different audiences. So that's really what it's about here today. But today it's all about you. So I've been doing this thing lately. I've been doing the show for a long time, and I like to understand people's roots, where they came from. I'd love if you could share, what did your parents do for a living?
So my dad was a structural engineer, and my mom they're both still, well, my dad's still a structural engineer, and my mom's accountant for the state of California. And so it's funny, my dad, pretty early on was really interested in programming and kind of did little side projects for his job. And, this is early on, the 90s or whatever, when I was growing up. And so he'd bring his computer home, he'd like hacking on stuff. And like, I just thought it was super, super cool. And that's kind of what, initially got me into coding and everything else.
So you're a nerd at heart, man. You're a hardcore. But those make the best product guys, right? Like you understand it. Do you remember your first? I don't know. I'm going to date myself here. I remember in elementary school learning on DOS prompt how to make the rocket ship launch. Do you remember that?
I didn't have that one. We did Lemmings and stuff like that, but I think my formative one was, I don't know if you guys had this, but in middle school for our math classes, we all got like these TI-83 calculators.
Oh yeah.
And so, I learned that you can actually program these things. And so initially started kind of building out these little math apps to like, do formulas and stuff like that. And then started making little games because you could like basically anything you downloaded onto the app, you could look at the source code, and started playing around with that. And that was kind of like my first, experience into the coding stuff. And I was kind of hooked since then.
I'm smirking as you say that because I have memories of I was terrible at math. Math is my Achilles heel, always was. Thank God for Excel formulas and everything. Sure. But I have fond memories from high school of like, my friends that were more technologically advanced. They would program the calculators with all the cheat codes and everything else we needed. And the teachers didn't catch on to that for a while, right? Like we used to like hide the cheats in the back of it. That was a computer.
Well, it's funny because my teacher actually saw that I was like building these little apps, and he's like, "Yeah, as long as you build them and you make them, you can use them in the test. As long as so that was nice."
Wow, right? Like they're like, here's the tool,
Yeah,
right? Like here's the tool. We didn't give you the rules. We didn't give you the rules.
yeah,
But think about that for a second. And it's crazy to think about that. That mindset of that teacher and you experimenting then, you look where you are now. And, obviously we're extrapolating years of career and history, but like that mindset of F around and find out, right?
yeah. I mean, it's always been kind of my thing. I don't know. With programming, I mean, it was like, or coding and computers in general. Like, it was awesome to have this like tool, and then see all the problems around you, and be like, oh wait, I can apply this tool to this problem, and it's awesome to see that it solves the problem. A lot of times it doesn't. It creates a lot more
Mm-hmm.
complications than necessary. But a lot of times it kind of fits that thing to a glove, and it was always really exciting to me, even kind of early on, to be able to kind of do something like that. And it felt like, oh, I have this little cheat code at life, and so that
Ah,
was kind of cool.
I dig it. And you could see the path here. Your parents were, numbers minded, process minded, and that led you to a career in engineering. And that led you down that path.
Yeah, kind of. I mean, it's interesting. I was telling a friend the other day. So I'm in hiring. We've been working on hiring, but I remember when I was in college, I joined this club, and this was 2000. I think like 2003 or 2005 or something like that. So we're still a little early in kind of the technology progress that we've kind of seen. And one of the things that they used to do was a fairly impacted club. It was called Berkeley Consulting, and they accepted maybe 5% of the people that applied. And their application process was basically you'd email your resume to like one big thing, and then we'd print out everything, and then we'd go one by one through them. And I joined this club, and I was like, this seems stupid.
Hmm.
We have like programs. I mean, we have websites and apps and stuff like that to
There has to be a
able to
better
do
way.
these things. Yeah, there has to be a better way. So I actually built I guess probably one of the first like applicant tracking systems, purpose built for this company. I mean, for this club, that it never went anywhere. But it was such a kind of a revelation. Like, build this thing, and then we used it. It worked really well, and it was like, oh, this is awesome. Like, making things for people is like really, really cool, and like solving problems is really, really cool.
Right, the first CRM database.
Yeah,
Right, and it's like, geez, and now now kind of look where we are. But you started in correct. Keep me straight on this one.
yeah.
Started in corporate, like your first job, and then you found a company relatively early on, and then you went back to working for the man, right?
So actually, I've never worked at corporate. So I guess my first internship, yeah, no, that was the start of two.
Well, working for somebody. Let's call it working
Yeah,
for
for
somebody
working for
else,
somebody else. So
not for yourself. Let's clearly
exactly.
define that. Not corporate. Corporate's a too much of a blanket term.
So my first kind of job was this company called hotornot.com. This was really early on.
Really, Hot or Not?
Yeah.
I remember Hot or Not.
Yeah. So they were a couple of Berkeley guys that had started the company in maybe 2001 or something, and they kept it really, really small. It was kind of like the first Tinder, essentially. You
Right, it
say
was the
yes or
first
no.
swipe, kind of Hot or Not.
Exactly.
I remember.
And so they kept it really lean. It was probably like 4 people at the time working there, and they hired us as interns.
Paid interns?
I'm sorry.
Paid interns?
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, it was crazy how much money we were getting paid for a college student.
Wow.
It's like probably what you'd make as an early, like a new grad, but
Right.
they were paying us as interns the same amount, which at 2005, like now that's kind of, par for the course of all the internships. But then it was like really, really cool, and weirdly they found us because some guy that one of the founders knew was looking for a freelancer for something, and happened at the time to search for PHP as like a keyword on Facebook back when you can actually search all of Facebook. Anyway, he found my buddy Drew, who happened to put it on his Facebook profile. Kind of weird, put a programming language on your Facebook profile, but found him that way.
Smart work.
Drew got the job that way, and then ultimately he recommended Drew, and then Drew recommended me, and kind of the rest is history. But so we worked there for a while, but it was really cool because 2005 to 2008 was kind of roughly where we were there, kind of working in. This is a lot of things were happening in Silicon Valley.
It was
the,
a lot.
The Facebook App Store came out, like the iPhone App Store came out, like, there were just all these things happening. It was kind of like startup school for us. And so we learned how to kind of manage machines, and we built I built our first Facebook app. It got millions of users.
You learned a ton,
iPhone
man.
apps. Yeah.
Perfect time and place, right? To be there.
Oh yeah, totally. And so, once that company sold, we were like, hey, what should we do? And, I just really wanted to build something for the iPhone. And we decided to start a company doing that afterwards.
And was that Miraphonic?
That was Miraphonic.
Okay, now we're back on track.
Yeah. So we built an app called Epic Pet Wars. And the goal here was just like the iPhone is cool. I want to build cool stuff for this thing. Literally and my buddy and I, we were living together and we were like, all right, we don't need much. We're 22. Who cares? Like, this is a cool thing. Let's just build something for it. And like, it'd be awesome if we could make like $100 a day. Like, that was kind of the goal. And, we had made a little bit of money to kind of survive from the Hot or Not acquisition. So it was kind of like we had a little bit of runway from that, and we just started building basically.
So let's go back. Let's go back to those early days too. Do you remember one of those early tough lessons learned the hard way, like a first punch in the face? Like maybe you overassumed something, right? Maybe you got too big for your head.
I mean, there was, this is the funny thing is for this startup in particular, I feel like we didn't learn any lessons because we just caught a wave. There was a couple lessons that I would take away. So when we started the thing, again, there was just no competition on the App Store. I mean, like the best game, like the number one app at the time was like,
was
like,
Angry Birds out yet? No, Angry Birds wasn't
no,
out
I don't
yet.
think so. You were like, it was like, this is the age of like, oh, we pretend we're drinking a beer or something else like that, right? Like they were pretty back, so we were like, this is cool, let's just build something. And it's so what we did was we saw all these like Mafia War types games taking off on Facebook.
Yep.
I and my buddy were real big fans of Pokemon since like early on. You're like, hey, what if we like merge the idea of Mafia Wars plus Pokemon into kind of a little pet collecting game? And my buddy,
like
his
Pikachu's, like digital Pikachu,
exactly. And we one of our good friends was an artist or is an artist, and so we had her make like these really cool characters, and we just built a little game around it.
So the first NFTs kind of.
Yeah, exactly.
It's funny when you think about that, right?
Yeah,
it's all collectibles.
Game, I mean, like,
it's all collectibles. It's all
exactly collectibles, exactly. And the game was okay, but it was just so different than what was out there that it really took off early on. I think ultimately looking back, I think there was a few things that I take away from that experience. We ended up selling the company for a great like result for 22-year-olds, for sure, 23-year-old, but one of the things that we saw kind of later on was like there was a lot of companies that for whatever we sold the company for, those companies were now making that amount of money per day, right?
That's crazy.
And I think we just like really burned ourselves out going super hard and just didn't have the motivation to kind of like keep it going. And so that was kind of one of the learnings of like, don't like go completely for it, leave some in the tank, because it's a sprint, but it's also a marathon, right? And we were like working,
but you're young
14
too, right?
hours a day.
But that's the thing, right? You don't know any better, and
totally.
but the carrot's at the end of the stick.
Of course.
And the carrot is still at the end of the stick right now. I mean, I don't want to jump too far ahead, but there's still a carrot at the end of the stick.
Of course.
Right? Yeah. But now you get older and you start to understand the journey, and you need to leave some gas in the tank a little bit.
That's always the thing.
You know
right?
when to
like,
throttle, you know when to pull back, right? Like, and especially now being a parent, right? You're like, shit, my energy levels, ebb and flow so much. How do I give all to my family, and how do I give all? Like, these are just ways you compartmentalize, and like.
Well, you think about it. I think about it a lot, actually, because I remember early on.
Let's talk about it.
There's two things, right? So early on, I think obviously you have all this time and energy. I think that's a big piece of it.
Right. No dependence, no
exactly
partner, kids.
Yeah.
Yes.
But you're also naive, and that's actually really useful. Being able to say like, hey, I don't know any better. I don't know how hard this is going to be. And so you just do it. Because like there was like a programmer's motto that I saw on Twitter the other day, which is like, we don't do these things because they're hard. We do them because we thought they were easy or something. Which is like that. It's just like, yeah, how hard could it be to build a company? How hard could it be to build an app? We can do that. Like, it's just this naivety, as well as just kind of this ego of like, yeah, I can do this. And I think once you get older, you get punched in the face quite a bit more. You are like, yeah, I got to be more careful. Oh, I've learned all these lessons. And at some point, it's just like, just do it, and if it works, great. If it doesn't, great. But like, you'll learn. But I think it becomes harder to be able to like kind of make those decisions as you get older.
For real. I mean, I'm a big believer in my motto is make shit happen.
Yeah.
Like that's what I wake up doing every day. It's just make shit happen. Keep the ball moving forward. Action over perfection. Those are kind of like my kind of plan your work and work your plan. Those are like my mantras every day. Kind of keep that moving. But what are your thoughts on like this glamorification? I don't even know what the right word is. This glamorizing of startup life and social media, making it look sexy, and these founders, these unicorn exits. Like that's not real. That's a very small percentage of what you see. That's a fraction of a percent that gets acquired and exit for for 10, 20x, right? Like that's not real. People don't see the work that goes into that and fundraising and all that other fun stuff. I mean,
What's interesting because when I graduated, I was kind of at the lull between the dot-com boom and this kind of new wave, right? And so I remember like in our college, the intro class for CS before I joined in the 2000s had like 600-700 people. Now it has 600-700 people, maybe more. Before when I was there, it was like down to 200 because everybody's like, who's going to do this, right? And even when I graduated, most of the people of most of my peers went to like bigger companies like Microsoft or something else
the
at the time.
fangs.
And startups weren't really a thing. It was kind of like I was one of the only ones that was, either doing it or working on it. And so it was kind of a different vibe of like, hey, we're just building, because you just didn't have the expectation that you would potentially make a lot of money. It was just like, this is just cool. It's like either we're building on cool stuff without people telling us what to do, or like, I don't want to go. Yeah, it was basically I don't want people to tell me what to do. It was kind of part of the thing, right? And so it was cool to be able to do that. And I think it's changed, obviously, and in some ways for the better. Like there's just more money in it. It's become kind of like a safe, cool choice, right? Instead of going consulting or banking, it's like, oh, I can go into startups and stuff, which I think perverts it a little bit, and it's just tough. But in a lot of ways, you also get a lot more people trying stuff out, which I think is a lot very, very cool too.
Great.
Right? So I don't know. I can see both ways, and obviously for us, like we'd love to see as many startups bloom because ultimately, I think you just see cool tech. So the more people trying stuff, the better. I just think that's more awesome than going to be another cog in a machine in a much larger company.
Right. I mean, it's a golden age of innovation. I mean, we're in it. We're seeing it with AI, and we'll get to that in a second here. But I want to just kind of finish this narrative on your story. So you found this company, but then AngelList, Wellfound came calling. Did you go? How did you get drawn to them? And that was an engineering role, right? Before you worked your way up.
Yeah, so we started Marathonic, sold that company to another company. That company got bought, and our goal, when we joined that other company, was like, hey, we want to build this kind of geo-based pet collecting game. And we just weren't able to quite get it right. And then once the company was bought, like the priorities shifted. So we were like, hey, like maybe it just makes sense to kind of move on. And ultimately Pokemon Go was kind of like the thing, and they had the IP, and which is great for them. But we basically, I just took like kind of a little bit of time off to kind of figure out what I want to do next, and then decided to start another company with one of the guys that I worked with at Hot or Not. And so we started that company. It was kind of this social news app, which is basically allowing people to share what they're reading kind of real time. And it was really cool, but it was kind of creepy because it basically automatically shared what you were reading. So it was hard to kind of get growth, but we raised some money.
Amit did some weird shit. What's he reading over here, right?
Exactly. No, but it was super awesome because you basically see kind of stream of consciousness what your friends were kind of like looking at and reading and everything else. And
I could go with that.
Yeah. It's like, oh, I don't care about high fashion, but one of my buddies is super, like he's an art director somewhere, and like he's reading this article, so I'll read it. Yeah, it's super interesting.
Expose me some culture, right? I could be cultural.
Yeah. But one of our investors, Naval, was the founder of AngelList. And so when we shut the company down, he was like, hey, why don't you guys come and join us here? And at the time we were living in New York. We're like, nah, don't really want to move back to San Francisco. But he's like, hey, like, let's try this on contract for a little bit. See how it goes.
Give it a shot.
Yeah. And, I guess the rest is history. Stayed there for like, I think my goal was to like, stay here a year or two and like see what it's like to kind of try something else. And it's been 10 years. So it's been a while.
Have you always wanted to be in a leadership position? Was that always like the course that you were set on?
I don't think so. I mean, like for me, building stuff was awesome. I think there's probably some level of ego and status chasing. It was like I want to be able to see if I can do it more than anything, right? And so that was probably one of the kind of the pushes towards that. But also, I think just I like doing stuff, learning stuff, right? And so that was kind of the other piece of like, I think I need to do this, and it'd be cool to try it out, basically, to kind of make this thing go.
Was it a challenge for you? Like, what aspects of leadership did you find challenging? Was it tough for you to deliver bad news? Was it tough for you to let people go? Like, what did you find really conflicting and hard as you built into the leader characteristics?
Sure. Yeah, there's a lot. I
This is the
think.
deep part of the show, man.
Sure, yeah.
This is where we get
Well,
serious. Enough of
we
this
can get super
nerdy
deep.
tech talk TI-83
Yeah.
bullshit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think one of the things is I like to be hands-on, right? I like to actually do the thing. And sometimes like I can do it pretty quickly because I have a
Mm.
lot of context, right? And so it's always been hard for me and continues to be hard for me to kind of like let my Legos go and let people do it and let people fail,
So
right? And
micromanaging, pretty much.
exactly. Well, not even
Yeah.
micromanaging, but like just doing the thing, like holding back some task and just doing it myself versus having somebody on the team actually like take it on. So,
Hmm.
and so that was, and I think as a leader, the biggest thing is like creating meaning and leverage, right? Like, so there's only so many hours in the day that I can actually do something. And, it's better if I can create excitement and meaning around doing that thing to two people because now there's
Hmm.
double the hours, right? And that's still a struggle for me. Like I want to say that I've solved it, but in the many years I've still kind of like struggled to kind of make that work. And I've found a balance, but it's always and it's just it's one of the things that I think about a lot too, especially when your startup is really early on, because like some of the things you do actually have
You
to
have to
do.
be hands-on,
Exactly.
right?
And
You have
so
to know
it's
how
an
to do
art.
it before teaching somebody to do it or telling
Exactly.
somebody to do it, right? You can't
Exactly.
tell somebody to do something. Same thing in recruiting. I'm a
Yeah.
recruiter. I'm
Right.
a recruiter by trade. I need to show you how to do it the way I
Exactly.
like to do it. My process too. So let's talk about Wellfound. Let's first of all let's talk
Sure.
about what was the whole branding going from AngelList to Wellfound.
Yeah, so when I first joined AngelList, there were about 10 people there. We were all working on kind of this idea of a social network for startups with kind of like apps built on top of
Hmm.
it, which is one first kind of idea was like, hey, let's make it easy for investors and founders to kind of meet. And
To
so we
find.
did this kind of almost like an email list where we manually introduce
I
people.
remember it. Yeah.
Yeah, and so like Uber's first money kind of went in through that
So
like
crazy.
setup. Postmates, some other
Hope you
people.
got in on that.
Did not.
No,
But
did not.
yeah, but it was a little bit before me. But one of the cool things about it was that it kind of showed a model of, hey, if you're a startup raising money, you're going to bring your team on to kind of show social proof that you're legit. You're going to bring your investors on,
Hmm.
and then we're going to send this out to investors, and the investors are going to tag all the companies they've been part of because they also want to show that they're legit, right? So you kind of bootstrap a network based off of that. And so the next step is pretty obvious. Well, if the founders are not being able to, once they raise money, they want to hire. So let's build an app to do that, right? So we started like an email list where founders and could reach out to other founders on the network essentially who were looking for jobs. And that was kind of the starting point of the whole thing. But as they grew, they kind of bifurcated. The investor side, became this online place where you could do investments. So instead of like meeting on the site and going
Mm.
somewhere else, we built this product called Syndicates, which allowed you to invest on the platform. And on the hiring side, these companies were growing from 5-person startups to, companies with like 50-person recruiting
Yeah.
teams, right? And so the makeup of the user on both sides changed significantly. So then there was very little overlap actually from just the founder and a very small set of companies to recruiters, and on the other side, capital allocators and stuff.
Did you clearly see this happening while it was happening, and were able to pivot the product and where the direction? Like, did the team have that vision? Like, we see what's happening here. Let's get ahead of it. Let's be on top of it. Or was it reactive versus proactive?
I think it was a little bit of both. I mean, you kind of see what you put out in the market and you
Mhm.
see kind of how it's getting, people are reacting to it and doing stuff, and you start to make good decisions based off of that. So I don't think we saw the future, but we did kind of start seeing it pretty early once the users started being so different. It was like, okay, yeah, this makes sense, kind of be their own different things. I mean, that was kind of the thing too. It's like, on one side, people are putting $100 million or $10 million into this like bank-like product, the syndicates product. Where on the other side, we're trying to be wacky and zany because like, you're finding your job at a startup. Like the mixing just didn't quite work,
Yeah.
right? And so we actually split the company about 6 years ago or so from Angelus Talent and Angelus Venture. But it was only about 2 years ago when we were like, okay, even this Angelus Talent, Angelus Venture is too confusing for people. We actually have to rebrand into
Hmm.
to Wellfound. We became like something different. Well, they stayed as Angelus, and so just created a much cleaner separation. And you can see that if you go to our website. Like we're still focused on the job seeker recruiter, and their site looks like very kind of serious, big money type of thing, which, totally makes sense for their branding and makes sense for our branding.
Well, it's smart that you recognize it and you split it instead of trying to confuse and dilute. And I think a lot of people have a problem clearly defining what the brands are, and you were smart enough to split that. So what exactly is Wellfound? Who's it for?
Yeah, so at the most basic level, we are the job marketplace for startups. That's what we've been forever. That's what we continue to be. So candidates looking for jobs at startups come to our platform, and startups looking to hire come to our platform. The key here is that we just have a high signal to noise ratio. If you're a startup looking for a candidate, you know that the candidate on the platform is looking for a startup job, right? So a Facebook engineer on our platform is way better. You'll get a way better response rate from that Facebook engineer than you will say on LinkedIn, because on LinkedIn, they
traditional
might be
outreach.
exactly,
Right.
exactly. And
Captive
so
audience.
yeah, exactly. And so, for startups, we essentially offer a recruiting system in a box. They come in, they get an ATS, they get free jobs. Like, they can just start recruiting. A founder can come on Friday afternoon and have his recruiting system built out with employer branding, ATS, and everything else by, an hour later, right? And he can have applicants by Monday.
So basically, you're taking my job.
So it's a tool, right? It's more of a tool than like a system. I mean, instead of taking your job,
it's a platform.
It's a platform, exactly.
But it's inbound, right? It's inbound, right?
So
but
we
also
do
you have the tools
both.
for
Yeah.
outbound.
Yeah, so we do inbound, and so that was kind of the main thing, and that's what most of the candidates and companies use the system. But a lot of people are like, look, that's not enough. I need to actively go outbound. So we have a series of tools that kind of you trade time for money to use them. So on the free side, we have the Recruit product, and we'll talk a little bit about kind of the Recruiter Cloud product, which is kind of the other side of it.
Wellfound, the team previously coined AngelList Talent, just came out with a revolutionary new product called Recruiter Cloud. Their goal with Recruiter Cloud was to eliminate all of the tedious tasks that bog down the recruiting process, causes major headaches, and slows hiring down. They also set you up with an expert sourcer to calibrate your search and help you find exactly the type of talent that you're looking for. Start with a simple one-on-one consultation, outline your must-haves, nice-to-haves, and any other custom specs, and they'll have great candidates booked on your calendar within days. All that's needed from you is to spend a few minutes each week reviewing a small batch of vetted and interested candidates. It's that easy. Plus, unlike a majority of other automated sourcing tools, Wellfound's decade of industry expertise allows them to pull from proprietary, up-to-date candidate data, nothing scraped. And more quality data means more quality matches. Say goodbye to all the headaches that come with finding great talent and start sourcing smarter with Recruiter Cloud. Check it out at wellfound.com/recruiter-cloud. Thanks. So what have you found, though, for this specific audience, startups, is unique for building out these platforms versus a large enterprise organization? What are some of the learnings that came out of it?
Yeah, I mean, the biggest difference, I think, is, it's not even the size of the company, which is part of it, but the biggest part of it is like how many recruiters are on your team.
Or none.
Roughly, yeah,
or
exactly.
zero. That's the difference. I
Right,
work with
exactly.
startups, and I am the recruiter.
Exactly.
I am the process. I am the brand.
Exactly. And so, we have like an internal understanding of like, if do you have 0 recruiters, that's kind of one bucket. Do you have 1 recruiter? That's like one bucket. And then once you get to like 2 to 3 or teams of recruiter, that feels like a kind of another bucket, and the products that
more
you need
enterprise.
are kind of different. Exactly. And so for these early 0, 1 to 2 recruiters, like, their big thing is just, I don't have any time. I have like 20 other things to do. Recruiting is really important to me. I know it's important, but also I got to build the product. I got to like do the marketing. I got to do 20 other things. I got to write the code, right? And so, for the early stage companies, it's really just about like, how do we make sure that anybody on the team can use it? Anybody that has low time, anybody can jump in and jump out whenever they need to. It works with the tools they have. Like, it's just really important to kind of do that. Whereas, I think the bigger companies, it's like, yeah, we can throw bodies at it and we can basically just solve the problem that way. And smaller companies just don't have that capacity.
Let's talk tech on this. How are you guys using AI? I mean, people are buzzing it around. I mean, I literally am at all these events. I'm doing the podcast there. I'm interviewing all the major platforms. I mean, I can name them all, but I'm not going to do that.
Sure.
People throw around AI. My first question is, how do you define it, and what are you using it for? And the third one, what are the inputs from the data perspective?
Sure. So
that was a multi-part.
So how I define it, right, is, in my mind, AI is like automates parts of the process that you were doing or you wanted to do, right? So let's say, when you look at a profile, you want to pull in the key skills or something else, and usually you have to read through the resume, find them or whatever, and then like AI can actually extract those pieces out for you, right? It's one of the things. So, one of the things that we did early on, or one of the things that we really care about is efficiency. Like I said, everybody has time poor, right? And so it was always about like, hey, what can we extract from a user's resume from a company side to like create a better match?
Hmm.
The idea was always like, can we create fewer but better matches? And it's really hard because, getting people to give you all that information on both sides is actually really difficult. You definitely trade off growth for like quality, essentially.
Verse. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Because like, oh, I can upload a resume. That's really easy. But like, oh, you want me to fill in all these other extra things? I'm not going to do it because like, well, I don't even know if I'm going to get a match, right? But anyway, so we started working on that. Kind of hit a dead end there a little bit. One of the things that we saw actually working though was, we'd sign up these companies to use one of our products, our sourcing products called Curated. They'd be super excited to use it. And like reach out in the first week and then drop off the second. And we're like, hey, what's going on? And they're like, I forgot, I don't have time. Right. And so we were like, hey, why don't we just do it for you? Just tell us what you want and we'll just reach out on your behalf. Right. And so we actually like signed in as the recruiter on their behalf for these founders and actually just started reaching out to people. This is like 4 years ago. This is not AI. This is just humans. We called it auto intros, which, AI, but it was actually just a human kind of doing the work. And so we were like, hey, this would be awesome if we could bring it to a lot more people. And
Hmm.
we could also go beyond people on Wellfound and think about everybody on the internet, essentially. So how do we essentially automate sourcing for you so you can basically every week get 5 high quality
Right. So you're
calls or connections?
shortlisting. Hmm.
Exactly. Beyond sort of shortlisting, we're actually going out and reaching out to the candidate, right? So
So
how
you're
can we
automating the outreach as well.
exactly. And so that was kind of the thing that like built that was kind of the impetus or the inspiration to build out Recruiter Cloud, which is basically like just come on, just tell us what you want and we will have like 5 to 10 interested candidates on your calendar, by next week, right?
Let's pause there for a
Yeah,
second. There's nuances, and I find
sure.
this too. Like, so
Yeah.
let's kind of pull the back. Let's
Yeah.
talk recruiting shop for a little bit because I
Yeah.
love to too.
Yeah.
I pride myself on being a badass recruiter. I'm a really good sourcer. I actually enjoy sourcing. I implement my own technology too
Yeah.
to find it efficient.
Yeah.
But there's an element of the dragnet, right?
Yeah.
There's an element of you can only find out so much information when sourcing based on a resume or a LinkedIn
Totally.
profile, and you don't know the details. So you're doing this outreach and you're pulling the net in, but you still have to kind of sift it.
Of course.
How do you work with those companies to really dissect the job description to put in the right inputs for the AI machine
Yeah.
to source? Because
Yeah.
those are the nuance, like those are the
Totally.
subtleties that increase efficiency and being more effective. Otherwise, now you're putting more work on my plate because you just
Exactly.
booked my whole calendar with bullshit. No
Exactly.
offense,
Yeah,
like
no,
these aren't
totally.
qualified candidates.
Absolutely makes sense. And so there's a few things that we do. So first off, like, we don't do this kind of automatically with just the job
Hmm.
description, right? So we get the job descriptions, we've configured some things. From there, the company actually tells us much more about what they want, right? It's like, oh, I want to recruit from these specific companies or something.
Right. So you're narrowing down the criteria.
Right. And so they're not going to put that on the job description that I am only recruiting from Meta and Google. But like if they'll tell us that, right? And so that allows us to kind of zero in a bit more. The other thing is we do a lot of calibration. So my
Hmm.
belief is strongly that like it when you see it, and recruiting is such a multi-dimensional thing that like in a lot of ways it's kind of vibes based, but you kind of have to see the candidate and you're like, okay, yes, I like that. Oh, it turns out I like this small particular thing that I wouldn't have told you unless I actually saw the candidate.
Unless you talk to them. Yep.
Exactly.
Or
Yeah.
saw it. Yeah.
Or saw it, right? And so we do that a lot of calibration, and then we basically have like a much more targeted hit list. And for us, like we set goals to be about like a 70 to 80%, correctness. So if we present a candidate to the company, we want
I
to
think
see
that's
7 out of 10 or 8 out of 10 actually approved by the company. Because it's a bad experience for everybody if you send over candidates that are not accepted and then ultimately fail the process.
Do you have traditional recruiters on your team?
So we do.
Like people that really have been in the trenches that understand
Exactly.
because recruiting is art and science. I learned that day
Exactly.
one. There's an art
Yeah.
and a science to it, plus knowing the industry that you're working in.
That's right. And so we have a handful of good recruiters that have been doing this for a while, that have been working for startups for a while. Because I think also it's not just the art and science of selection, it's also the art and science of managing the company and what they care
Hmm.
about. We'll have early stage founders that come in and be like, I only want to recruit from these top tier firms and I want to pay, basically what is like the minimum of what a startup can
Right.
pay.
You want Google on a McDonald's salary. That shit's not going to fly.
Yeah, exactly.
And so it's
And
managing
so
expectations. You're
exactly, a
not
lot
going
of
to get
managing expectations, a lot of hand holding and everything else.
that.
So we do that to kind of help them through the process and make the hire. So our goal really is like, we'd love to, I mean, these are goals, right? But like, we'd love to get you on, we'd love to get you a hire by 8 weeks. And we just work backwards. It's like, if you need to make 8 weeks, if you need to make a hire in 8 weeks, or ideally 4 weeks, how many interviews do you need to do? What is your interview
Right.
process
What's that
to get
funnel
that? And
like?
then let's just build this out and like move the process for you. Because I think that's just the biggest thing. It's just like consistently hitting the process, iterating on the process. I think we
Always
can
be
do it
optimizing,
exactly.
closing the aperture.
Yeah.
I want to double back to something.
Yeah.
I find this a lot. I work with startups.
Yeah.
I advise for startups. They're my clients. And they always want that. And they always want the best possible candidate. They want from the top companies, but they only could pay a certain amount. And then they look at us and be like, why aren't you filling the pipeline? I'm like, you think people want to leave for, no one's going to care about your company as much as you do.
Sure.
And equity is toilet paper unless it's real, it's something there. Do you find yourself sometimes having, kind of these one-on-one private conversations with founders about their ego and kind of level setting them a little bit and like putting it, like managing expectations? Like, did you kind of like, put on the Papa hat and say, all right, let's chat a little bit. I understand what you're trying to build. You have lofty goals, but we need to be realistic here. What is it that's going to attract? Like, how, right? Like, how do you remove the ego? Because there's a lot of ego involved in hiring, and I see it all day long, man. I've been doing it for a while. I see it. It's real, and it's dangerous.
Yeah, it's tough, right? Because like part of the reason why they're in the position they're in is because of like a belief in themselves, which they need, right? And their product and everything else. And so I think the first thing we like to do is just like, we like to give them an understanding of like what we think their interest rate is going to be based off the criteria of their company, what they raised and everything else, as well as, what they're looking for. So, if they're looking for a high demand candidate in a low supply area and their company is paying kind of low end of markets and potentially doesn't have a ton of like social proof, it's like, look, you're probably going to get like a 1% interest rate. And let's say there's 500 candidates that match your description. You're going to get like 5 calls, right? And if you think you can close in 5 calls, great. Like, we'll do it for you. But like, that's kind of the issue. So I think that's part one of just kind of like working the math out with them. And usually that helps a lot. The other piece is like, let's actually build out your employer branding, right? Like, let's talk about why they should join. Like, what is so awesome about you?
Yeah. Why?
Yeah, exactly.
Why are they going to leave an established multi-trillion-dollar organization where they have benefits, security?
Exactly.
Security is relative these days, but like, why? Why are they going to take a risk with you? Why do they want to come for that ride with you? What is it?
Exactly. And we try to just pull that out and kind of, work with them on that and give them kind of constant feedback. It usually doesn't work to go tell somebody, hey, you're actually not going to be able to do this because, whatever. Because like, again, they shouldn't believe us. The reason why they're working is because like, they have this belief in themselves and their ability and everything else. And, good on them to kind of try it. But I think they need to kind of see the market a little bit and kind of work towards it. But some people take the feedback faster than others. Some people look at the data and move faster than others. But I strongly believe, like, look, if you're a startup early on, especially, you have to take bets that other people won't. You have to find candidates that other people aren't necessarily already pricing as super spectacular and stuff. Or you just have to be super, super compelling. We've had founders where like the offer looks not as like compelling, but they're just really compelling, and the product is really compelling.
They get them to believe on going that journey with them.
Or the product itself is like really awesome, or the team is really awesome. Like, they find reasons for people to kind of take that potential pay cut because they care about something else in their lives, right? And finding those people is really, really important.
No, I love that take, and I appreciate you sharing that. What's scaring you with AI and the tech? What's the downside?
Yeah, I mean, look, so the process that I mentioned, right? So getting the information and getting a call, right? And so right now, a lot of this is a mix between AI and humans, kind of in the loop, right? And what we've done is we've taken that process and we've also packaged it as a self-serve version where companies can actually use it for free and try it out instead of using our team. And we think it's really cool. And we're really excited about being able to automate different parts of like more and more of this. But I think in the product itself, like one of the things that's kind of interesting is like how much of judgment can actually be moved over and how much is it, it's less of a technology problem, more of a human problem, right? Like maybe it's just more handholding and everything else. It's kind of interesting to kind of figure out of like, how much can AI actually do, right?
Push the limits of it.
Yeah.
Without being biased, right? Like
exactly.
that's the other thing right now is like, how do you remove bias
I mean, it's a good question, but also, like, frankly, every recruiter I talk to is super biased too. So
We
let's
all have
exactly,
unconscious bias. I mean, I
yeah,
talk about it ad nauseum. We all are.
right,
I don't care, and it's not a racist thing. It's how
sure,
we're brought up. We all have unconscious bias within
of
us, and
course,
how do you? And the trick to that is recognizing your bias and being self-aware of it. So, how do you train the machine to
right.
do that?
I mean, it's simpler than that, right? Like we are all like we see a name brand and we instantly ascribe some level of awesomeness because of that
Right.
name
There's
brand,
like
right?
bias, of
Like
course.
a person looks at a Harvard on a resume and they're like, oh, this person must be smart,
Pedigree
right?
bias. Yep.
Exactly, right. We see
Hmm.
this all the
Yeah.
time,
Of
right?
course.
And so the question here is like, what biases are you encoding and how are you kind of applying them, a broader kind of system. And, there's a few things that we try to do for sure. Like all of our AI stuff excludes anything with like names or pictures. Like we just don't have any identifying information when it
Smart.
comes to matching and stuff like that. And that helps a lot. Um, but it's actually kind of nice to be able to see what biases are encoded and work through
Mm.
them. Whereas, like again, with every recruiter, they have their own bias; they're just not telling you what they are, right? So I think that that's been interesting for us to see because like, you think about sourcing, right? Like, what are you doing? You as a recruiter are taking all the knowledge that you have of the world, of your historical understanding of like the company, and then you're looking at a resume and making a split-second decision,
Hmm.
probably less than 15 seconds.
It's pretty quick.
Yeah. And, how much can you actually do in that 15 seconds? I actually believe in computers to be able to do a better job than you with less bias because they have more information and
More data
context and everything
points,
else.
and
Exactly.
they're more binary, right? More
Exactly.
linear than me putting subjectivity and bias to it.
Exactly. And
Like I
so
judge a company name, I judge tenure, I
totally.
judge location, I judge pedigree, I
This is one of the things
all
we
the
see, even
things.
even companies, right? Like maybe you can keep 300 companies in your head, maybe a little bit more, right? But like the ability to like look at it, especially an early stage candidate that has worked at a really awesome startup, and
And
you
like,
have no idea that this is an awesome startup. You're looking at the image on the company profile, and you're looking at the company website, and you're like, yeah, does this look legit? Maybe, maybe not, right? You're
no
encoding all
idea.
this
You have
stuff.
no idea.
Exactly. And so a computer can take into like AI can take into a lot more information and
You could
just
rank 5,000
exactly.
startups and put some kind of qualification score and be
Exactly.
like, shit, Amit worked here.
Right.
They only have 4 employees, but look at their
Exactly.
investment with yada yada scoring.
That's right. And so we just think that this opens the aperture of people that you can look
Mm,
at because it
I
can
love
just
that.
take more into account. And on top of that, we can contextualize things a lot better for you. So we can
I would
say exactly what you said. Like, hey, we presented this candidate because they worked at a top 50 startup or their investors were like top tier
right,
or, they went to this random school that you don't know, but is actually really, really good at engineering, right? Like,
right.
so it's all those little pieces and putting them all together and presenting to in a way that like you can actually digest and make better decisions.
I would love to apply that tech, and dude, it's like the plumber with the broken toilet. Like I see it all around me. I
Yeah.
would love as a recruiter to apply more of that to my sourcing because right now it's we have some other tools we use here and there, but really let's do it the right way. Let's train the systems for what we need. And I always say it, and I've said it ad nauseum. Admit, use AI as a tool and not a crutch.
Yeah.
Right? Use it as a tool and humanize it. So
Well, to that point,
yeah, sure.
you can actually apply it right now. So we actually built out the self-serve version. We're giving it away for free right now in beta. So you can actually try it out, try a lot of these things out on your own and see if if you like it. It misses some of the stuff that we do just on the autopilot side, but I think it'll give you a taste for free of like how that experience will work.
Yeah, and I mean, I'll drop the plug at the end, but that's
Sure.
wellfound.com/recruiter cloud. Definitely check that out, everybody. We'll get to that in a moment here. So let's bring it home here. Quick, not quickly. Let's give you the time to talk about it.
Yeah.
When you're interviewing somebody, let's talk human for a minute here. By the time someone gets you, they're qualified on paper, they have the experience, but you mentioned vibes. What's that go-to Amit question to assess vibes, right? Because you also want to remove bias, right? I mean, I have to love you, but if you're great at it and you're still like
Yeah.
how do you assess it? Because I don't use
Yeah.
culture fit. I never use it. I've removed it from my vocabulary. I hate the F word, but vibes I like because you have to vibe.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that vibes for me was more of like an explainer of how like I think recruiters and stuff like kind of look at
Right.
the resumes and stuff like that. But I think there's a few things that, I care about when interviewing that I think is important. So I think for me, I don't think I am the best manager in the world, right? I think I'm fine. I can give you some ideas, but I want people that have extremely high agency that when they see a problem can go solve it and stuff. And that's kind of one of the big things that I'm looking for. Like what problems have you identified in your past like job and how are you like how did you solve them, right? I don't want someone who like I need to know the information, but I don't want someone who complains. I want someone who's like, okay, this is a problem. Here's how I think we should fix it. Actually, I don't know, but like let's talk about it, right? Like someone who has agency, who can kind of see the world and be like, I can make a change, is incredibly important to me. And so generally when I have conversations with people, like that's kind of the number one like thing that I'm trying to figure out. Like how high agency is this person? How much do they think they can bend the world to themselves versus like expecting stuff on a platter or complaining essentially.
I'm shaking my head because I've asked this question probably 150 times to similar leaders, and they all go in that direction, either
Yeah.
problem solving or curiosity.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And they go hand in hand, right? Like if
Yeah.
you're curious, you're going to figure out how to solve it.
Yeah.
Right. And like, can you work with limited information, and can you figure shit out? Right. Figure shit out. And then from an interview process, tell me what you did
Yeah.
and how you did it.
Yeah.
Plus, what was your contribution? Was it the
Yeah.
team doing it? Were you sitting back supervising, or were you kind of hands on the trenches? So let's bring it home here. What's keeping you up at night these days besides your little kids?
Speaking of the kids, one of this curiosity stuff
Yeah.
is interesting because, like, I was talking to my wife about like the attributes that we want to instill in our children, and like curiosity, the ability to grind, essentially, like those are probably the two biggest things I'd love to kind of have in them, because I feel like that like ultimately determines your success.
It's
Your
taught.
ability to deal with like setbacks, but also just like be interested in things. It's just, I think it's a super great combination no matter kind of where intelligence or anything else kind of ranks. If you have those two, I think it'll take you really, really far for any field.
Yeah, I preach it, man. Like we let our kids fail hard. I'm
Yeah,
gonna make it when I have to give you a soft landing. There will be a safety net, but I want you to fail. I want you to
yeah,
feel what it likes. Like I'm training my kid on the bike.
yeah,
I
yeah,
said to him, Ollie, you're gonna fall. You're
yeah,
gonna get hurt, and I'm telling you, you're gonna get hurt.
yeah,
I'm not stopping you from getting hurt, but you have to figure it out.
yeah. It's tough too, though, because you kind of want
You
to
don't want
save
him to
them
get
from
hurt.
everything. Yeah.
I may
Yeah.
stop the bike from like fully
Yeah.
going into a tree, but if we're on the soft grass and I'm teaching him how to ride a two-wheeler,
Yeah.
you have to learn to balance. There's no way you're going to learn how to balance unless you know what it feels like to fall off.
Yeah.
There's no way you're going to have that feeling because you have to be able to self-correct on the bike,
Yeah.
the balance. So there's my
Exactly.
little analogy.
Yeah, but in terms of what's keeping me up, I think it's like, we're in a very, very interesting time where,
Mm-hmm.
like, I don't think anybody really knows what the next 5 to 10 years are going to look like, right? And I think in some ways that's really awesome because I think this is where interesting companies and just interesting things happen because like we're going through tectonic shifts that like we
Mm-hmm.
hadn't seen in a while. Um, but also that's kind of scary, right? Because like who knows like if anything that we're doing is actually going to be the right thing versus like somebody coming completely unburdened by what has happened in the past can kind of build something different, right? Or frankly, maybe AI takes all their jobs too, right? Like who knows, right? It's a very interesting place to be.
Terminator, man.
Sure, yeah. I think it's a really awesome place to be, but it's like there's a lot of excitement with some trepidation about like what this means, right? I mean, it's a similar like I think when I was when the iPhone came out, there was a similar vibe, right? Like this is going to change
What
the
is
world
this?
in some meaningful way. But again, I was 22. I was in it. Now I'm like 38, and I'm like, I'm on the tail end of this stuff. Like, it's a little different.
Oh man, so let's bring it home here. I love this
Yeah.
conversation. You've been around the block. You work with some great mentors. So what is that single greatest piece of advice that you've received, Emmett, that you take action on every day? So that actionable piece of advice.
No, that's tough.
Could be a mantra, something you wake up every morning, kind of sets you going in the right direction.
There's two things. One of the things is this agency piece. I think knowing that or truly believing that you can kind of bend the world to your will in some way, and just understanding that. And I think it takes a lot. It takes like intelligence, it takes optimism, it takes like kind of putting away all those like times where you've been pushed back and like insecure and everything else, and like focusing me like, yes, I can actually make something happen, is like I think that's always been a big thing that I think doesn't necessarily come as natural to me as I've like worked with people who just like look at something and they're like, yeah, like, I'm just going to do it. Like I have that much belief in myself or my ability or like whatever to like just do it. Whereas for me, I think there's a little bit more reminder, a little bit more insecurity potentially around like, hey, am I good enough at doing this thing? And I think that's been the biggest things. Like, ultimately, you're not going to succeed if you think you're just going to fail, right? Like you just got to believe that you're going to be able to do this thing. And it doesn't work, it doesn't work. But I think that's always been the biggest thing.
Well, thank you for sharing that. That's vulnerable too. It's self-awareness. It's, yada, yada, self-doubt and imposter syndrome. And that's all real because we're human and we're fallible. And it's about confidence and believing in yourself and, parking those wins and being okay with the wins and learning from those losses. So, I mean, last but not least, you've come a long way. You have a long way to go. I truly believe that you understand that life is about the journey, but we have to be proud.
Yeah.
How do you define success?
Ooh, that's a good one. I don't know. Like I think, as I've gotten older, I think success for me would ultimately be being able to do what I want when I want to, I guess. You know, it's like as much money or whatever just doesn't matter. Like just the freedom to just do whatever I want whenever I want to, like explore the problems that I want to when I want to, play with my kids when I want to. Like that's to me that's like pure wealth, right? Like, and that takes like the ability to get some level of success,
Mm-hmm.
some level of like health, all sorts of different things. But like I think that's kind of the biggest thing.
Isn't that the aha, man?
Yeah.
Right? That time is the ultimate currency,
Of course. Yeah. Yeah.
right? The time and the freedom. And,
Freedom.
money helps
Yeah.
get you there, but money is only the fuel to your options.
That's right. It's 100% freedom, and like it's interesting because I think if it doesn't necessarily take that much money to do it, depends on like kind of your lifestyle and stuff. But if you want 20 vacations, homes, and like a bunch of cars and everything, sure,
Right.
it's going to take a shit ton of money.
Yeah.
But like live below your means as much as you can, and then maybe you can also have that as. I'm not there yet, but one day.
Yeah, just don't move to Long Island and deal with suburban poverty, as we like
Fair.
to call it, right? It's just anyway, we digress
Yeah.
here. So, Amit, I want to thank you so much for joining me on the show. Thank you for being a partner. I love what you guys are building there. This is awesome. It's real. I want everyone to check it out. Go to wellfound.com/recruitercloud, and you can find out more. Where else could folks connect with you? Where could they learn more?
Yeah, wellfound.com. They can also email me directly, amit@wellfound.com. Love to hear from people using their products or just like, talk about the space in general. So yeah, shoot me an email.
Awesome. I loved our chat, man. Hang with me for a moment as we sign off here. And everyone listening, you know where to find out more at thepodcast.com. Follow us on other social media channels. You know where to find us. Remember, if this show resonated with you, hit that like button, subscribe. Remember, sharing means caring. We certainly appreciate it. Remember, be good to yourself, be good to others, and catch us next week for another great episode of the podcast. Take care, everybody.
Wisdom is forever, but for us, it's time to go. Thank you for joining us. Luckily, we'll be back with our next episode soon, jam-packed with more incredible humans. Thank you for listening, subscribing, and sharing. To join the conversation, search The Podcast on LinkedIn. And to catch up on past episodes and more info, please visit www.thepodcast.com.